Hey, folks, and welcome to episode 125 of the Hunger for the Hustle podcast, the show where we dive into it with business owners, with entrepreneurs, with creators in a mission to uncover their journey and ultimately what drives their hunger for the hustle. My guest today is no stranger to business, having over 33 years in the art of it. And I'm going to call it an art because I believe it is. And I'm sure, actually, I think my guest might do as well. Keith Lloyd is a company builder. He specializes in providing businesses with prescriptions to increase their bottom line and build a healthy, thriving business. But that is not how Keith started, and his chapter in the book details that. We're going to be getting into that today. Keith, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the show. How are you in Canada?
Yes. Thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate the invitation and the challenge to do this book. And between you and Michael, I really appreciate the opportunity. And thank you very much for having me on the show.
My pleasure. You're only our second Canadian guest, so it's quite an exciting time. It's quite a privilege. Michael being the first to.
Well, I know the other guy, and he's top notch.
Yeah, he's a good guy too, and also no stranger to business. Michael, for anyone that's listening doesn't know, Michael Bridgman was the person who actually came to me with the idea for the book to start with, and collaborated with me on its creation, its co-editing, and everything that played out in between over those 2 years, which was quite the journey and quite the mission. But here we are with it out, a couple of weeks. It'll be 2 weeks actually this Saturday, and what a great time it was. That live event that we did on Saturday was a lot of fun, a lot of high energy, and a lot of teamwork and camaraderie within it as well, which I think is pretty important ingredients for business.
Yeah, I want to say, like, one of the things that I noticed and really liked about the collaboration aspect of this book, and having 28 authors doing this, every single one that I met before, in all that 2-year lead up to the release of the book, but also on that launch day, they're all spectacular in their own way. They're all very professional. They all have a great story to tell, and a great story to be able to inspire others with. And I've talked to a lot of people about this book, and they're like, what's the book about? And it's like, well, you want some inspiration on those days when you're having a really crappy day, right? It doesn't matter whether you're an entrepreneur or not. There are stories in this book that will absolutely inspire you to push on. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. From all walks of life, from all people and that is the essence of it, aiming to help people from all walks of life. The authors are from all walks of life and from all different parts of the world. There's stories in there that are going to help people from everything to motherhood, to business, to bereavement, to just improving themselves and their own personal development and ultimately their own lives. I'd love to talk to you about Keith, your chapter and the writing process for it. Your chapter is called Keeping It on the Rails, 5 Vital Keys to the Riding the Roller Coaster of Entrepreneurship. Excuse me. And was that the first subject that came to mind and you instantly went with it, or were there a few things that you pulled on first?
Well, there was, the writing was actually, like, I do a lot of business writing. I do business planning for people and write those. And I do, there's a certain level of marketing as well within what I do with other companies to help them kind of guide them in their branding and their strategy and things like that. So, it wasn't one of those things where I really struggled with. Like, I know there were some authors in the book that were really struggling with how to and what their story was and all that. And for me, it was really about, like, okay, the inspiration side, right? It's like, because when you're in it, like, you don't think about those kinds of things, Jake. Like, you just, like, you're in it and you keep going. And it's like you push through and you're going to push through. But, when you're in that low, it's like, okay, what do I need to do to get out of it, as opposed to wallowing in that bottom piece, right?
Yeah, you can't see the picture. You can't see the picture while you're in the frame.
Yeah, exactly. And so in writing this book, like, like, the parameters that you guys set out were really good from my perspective, right? They were great, because it's like, here's a couple of different avenues that you can use, or themes that you can use in terms of writing your story. Pick one, right? So for me, the hard part was actually the picking of one, because I've gone through a lot of the stuff in my 37 years of entrepreneurship. So, you know, it became then, okay, how do I want to inspire people? And a lot of the things that I wanted to make sure was in there were how entrepreneurs are affected by entrepreneurship, right? So there's a lot of people that, if you've never been an entrepreneur, for the listeners out there, it is very much a roller coaster ride, like very much a roller coaster ride. And you always have to expect both sides of it, right? You have to keep your emotions on level, because I've been saying, especially for the last little while, emotions cost you money, right? Especially in business. And so, you know, you got to keep that, while chaos keeps going up and down, up and down, up and down, to keep that vision, that long-term vision in mind, and stay with it, and get to that place where you are like, super, super focused on what your real reason for doing this is, like what's your why in all this, right? You talk about, Simon Sinek talks about it a lot, and a lot of people know that talk, so I'm not going to go into that side of it. But if you know why you're doing it, then you will get out of bed in the morning no matter what, because your passion is going to drive you, right? So for me, like, I wanted to make sure that got into the book somehow into my chapter. That, like, I understood, I've been through those roller coaster rides. I've had multiple companies. I have multiple companies now, and quite frankly, like, the big thing for me, in the low, was losing my identity. I had a very successful company that I started from zero, that I ran for 20 years, and in that, it was great. And you're in it, and you're like I said, you've got that focus, and you're like, okay, I'm going, right? And then I sold it off at the 20-year mark, and all of a sudden, day one after, I'm going like, who the hell am I?
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, I've been that for 20 years. Who the hell am I now? Right? And in trying to reestablish exactly what that was, I also, had a lot of conversations with people that I'd worked with, or that had been suppliers or customers or whoever. And it's very much like, well, that's not who I am anymore, but that definitely was who I was. Right. So now I got to build this. What is this new identity? Right. So it actually took me about 2 years to get through that identity phase. Right. And I really wanted to convey that in the book, because in talking to all those people, I also learned how much it affected them. Like, for suppliers, it was a loss of a fairly significant account.
Yes. Yeah.
For our wholesale customers, it was, we now have to go look for somebody who's going to provide that. Not only that, but the kind of revenue streams that my company was giving them, right? Now all of a sudden, they have to hope that they can do that too, right? And then the end user, they're going like, what the hell happened? I don't see these guys anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And so it affects, not to mention my employees.
Of course.
Right. And everybody else. Now, I was fortunate that the company that I sold this off to absorbed about half of my employees. So I really wanted to take care of them, because they'd taken care of my business for so long. Right. So I wanted to make sure that all got acknowledged within my chapter. Right. That was really important to me. And then also to inspire people by just kind of, like, I got into consulting, and I got into, surgery, because, there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have this passion. They know what they love. I've always said, if you know what you love, go monetize it, right? You'll figure out how to make it work, right? But it will be what gets you out of bed in the morning, right? So ultimately, on the crappy days, you're wondering, like, why the hell am I here? But then you just know why you're there, right?
Yeah.
So
And on
Go ahead.
that, if I can ask you a question on that, 1986, you started your first business, 2 years
Yeah.
before I was even a twinkle in my parents' eyes. But you, so you know that goes to show how much experience you have. But
You're telling people
you,
my age.
no one heard, no one heard. How long did it take you to find your why? I know you stumbled into that first business. You know, it was a food manufacturing company,
Yes.
and you literally stumbled into it. But from that kind of, perhaps we could get into that a little bit later. But how long did it take you to find that why?
I think, like from the passion side, it took a little bit because I didn't know this is what I really wanted to get into. Like both times like in both iterations, like if you take, first 20 years and then the next after that, there was two very separate stories, two very separate directions, two very separate dynamics and passions and all those things, right? I'm still a foodie, right? But doing what I do now allows me just to do it at home or do it for friends or whatever, right? But and I still love to do that, but for me it was an evolvement, and really business is an evolvement. Every business is an evolvement, and you start to understand things, why you do them, and you don't get complacent, but you understand why you're doing them. And then if you feel like you need to change, then you change them, right? And so that passion, like there was a certain level right off the hop of like, there's a lot of people out there that probably could use all the learning opportunities that I've had over the 20 years, and if I can, and in that whole understanding the ripple effect, right? Understanding that maybe it would behoove them to at least have a chat with me to understand how much everyone else is affected, but also like that you got to keep going if you really believe in this and if you're really passionate about it, right? And I figured that out fairly quick. Like it was more from a place of support. Like how can I support other people, other entrepreneurs, right? I have this knowledge base. And quite frankly, my consulting business has never been about the money. It's been always about like helping, right? How can I be of
Yeah.
service to people? Because honestly, like if you're a solopreneur, it's a really lonely road. And especially if your spouse is not an entrepreneur, they're wondering how crazy do you have to be able to do this on your own, right?
Pretty crazy.
I mean, really damn crazy, right?
Yeah.
So like who can you turn to in those situations? And back in that at that time, like this is 17 years ago or so, no, there wasn't that much out there. There weren't that many people out there. And for small business who couldn't afford the big consultants, the Accentures and some of the other ones that are out there, North American wise, with speaking at this point right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, they couldn't afford them. So where do you turn to? Like, and especially if none of your friends are entrepreneurs, right? So I thought, there's got to be a resource out there. And there wasn't, not really, right? There are a few people doing their thing. And, Business Surgeon wasn't the first name of the company that I started to help people, but it became that way, right? Because I started to understand that in consulting, you have to pinpoint exactly what the problem is because your value is, you want to give value, right? And if people are paying their hard-earned money, like entrepreneurs work their asses off, right, for the money that they make. And in some cases, they don't make much. So if you want to help them grow, especially those ones, I want to help them grow, then they need to go and make more money, right? So, and you can hear like I love doing this stuff.
Yeah.
Because you watch people evolve as you help them. And that to me is kind of the payoff more than anything else. You watch businesses evolve. You watch them grow from being like fly by the seat of the pants and holy shit, I don't know if I'm going to survive tomorrow. Payroll's coming next week. Am I going to make it? Like all those kinds of things to, I have a budget. I can plan, right? I can plan where I'm going to spend my money. I can plan a vacation. oh my God, there's some freedom in this, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure some of your solopreneur listeners can relate.
I can relate. You know, I've had businesses that have failed, for sure. It's
Yeah.
it's like anything. It's very rare that I hear that anyone gets it right on the first shot. Especially
Oh,
if you're like me. You know, I never had any business schooling. My business schooling was selling candy and sweets for the kids on the playground. That's where I learned my first ever business, and then it went to eBay, and then I did my own club night events, and just
yeah.
the biggest learning was by making mistakes along the way. But if you can dial in or find someone, success leaves clues and experience leaves clues too. So if you can find and connect with someone that is willing to give you those clues, even better at a cost that's made to work with them. It's customized is what I'm looking for their business. Then that's great. So the business surgeon, it's a good name. It's a great name. It kind of, I always think the good names are the ones that explain what they do in the title, because you're like, oh, I can understand what that business does as well, but also things that make people ask questions. And I think the name business surgeon does both of those things. It explains a little bit. Okay, we're a business surgeon. We're going to be operating on a business here, but it also intrigues me and makes me want to know more. So I'd love you to tell the story of how that came about. I'm sure there's a story behind it.
Yeah, it was really interesting because you're more into like marketing and things like that now, Jake, right? So, and Michael definitely is. Michael's a marketer. And so one of the things that I want to say about the name is that, I started out going like, okay, what's the end result that I want for, like, if people work with us as a consultant, with consultants, what do I want their end result to be? And I'm like, well, freedom, right? If you have the freedom to do whatever you want to do because you've got the money to spend, because you've got the time to use, right, or invest, then freedom makes sense for a name. People will get it, right? And the funny thing is, I got 4 years in and went, people aren't getting it. I got to explain this all the time. Like, what is freedom consulting? And so I had a client that I was working with, and we were working out of a small boardroom, and it was a co-working space basically. And the next group of people that were coming into that boardroom to work was a networking group, and my client knew someone within the networking group, and so they said to me, hey, I want you to meet so and so, and I meet this person, and they say, what do you do? And I help people. I'm kind of like, I help people find what they do, and then we structure them properly so that they know what to do. And we don't go after the things that aren't, like that they're healthy. If it's healthy, then we don't do anything with it. And in this day and age, it's kind of like crisis consulting, but you don't want to call it that, right? And so the person looked at me, well, you're a doctor, you're a business doctor. I went, yeah, I am. Right? Yes, I am. And at that point, I went to one of my, so I met, and I let it sit for a couple of days. And then I went to someone who is still one of our marketing associates within the company. And we sat down and we talked about that. And he said, well, like, what do you want to do with this? And I'm like, well, so if we're changing and rebranding the name, like, here's some things that got thrown at me in the last couple of days. And he said, well, what, like, and we looked up business doctor, and business doctor is a really common kind of name or common thing, right? So, and this was back in 2011. And I said, well, he said, well, what about if, because you're pretty precise in what you do, why don't we call you a surgeon? And I went, that's it, right? And then, there was all the flaky kind of stuff, or the funny stuff of like, yeah, you'll just go and you'll walk into, like, businesses, and you'll have your lab coat on, and you'll have, your mask and your stethoscope and all these things. And it's like, that's great for marketing, but nobody takes you seriously. So, so we just got into it, and business surgeon really stuck. And the more I told people about what I do and what my company name was, the more they liked it, and they got it. So I no longer had to explain it anymore all of a sudden, right?
Yes, it's instantly identifiable. Then when people ask you what you do, I'm a business surgeon. Oh, I get that. I can understand what it is. Instead
Yeah,
of, I'm someone who, it becomes a 2-word answer instead of a series of sentences,
a
which is
5-minute
a lot.
conversation.
Yeah, yes, yeah. I know that. I know that feeling. I sell a particularly niche product, and there's no way of explaining it but getting into a 5-minute conversation, which
Well, yeah, exactly. And so,
often entertains and surprises people. But they say with business, it's got to pass the telephone test, right? If you call 10 people and they ask you what your name is, if they don't get it straight away, or they have to say pardon or excuse me, then it's
yeah.
not that it's not going to work, but it's not off to a great start if you're having to. That's your first barrier.
Oh, absolutely. Like you spend half your energy trying to have people wrap their head around not only the name, but the concept of what you're doing. And it's easy for me to say, well, I'm a business consultant, and then they put you in that entire huge pool of business consultants. Oh, you're one of those, right? It's almost like you're a car salesman, right? And it's like, no, I'm not actually. Like, this is why we do surgery, because we want to make sure that we don't address anything that we don't need to address. So we do it with precision, right?
Yeah, because you're going into businesses to make them better, not to reinvent them. There's some things that are already working within the business and they don't need touching; they're working just fine.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
like one of our core values is that we listen and collaborate with our clients. So if we're not listening, then we can't tell people, like, we can't guide them in the right way, right? And I don't want to be the person that, like, this was something that came out of my experience with my first business, because I did bring consultants in, and the consultants were 5 out of 10, right?
you're
But
allowed to swear on this show if you like, Keith.
I think I have already a couple of times. I get really passionate about it. But like, that was part of my model when I sat down at day one and going, like, well, what don't I want to be? Right? I don't want to be overpriced. I don't want to be undervalued. I don't want this. I don't want that. And I'm like, so really, like, we want to be precise in what we do, because the reality is that nobody can afford a bad consultant, right? Like, especially, and so my focus, like, when I sat down day one, it's like, I'm going to change this industry. I really, like, big ego at the time of, or I think, I just finished 20 years as a business owner, and a successful one. I'm going, like, I want to change this industry. I want to change the perception of this industry, that we're not all overpriced and undervalued, right? That's what we deliver. And so I've always had that as my mantra for this company, is to be that person that shifts how people think about business consultants and coaches as well, right? If you do a good job, then you really do affect not just that entrepreneur, you affect everyone around them, which goes back to that ripple effect, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so that was really that was a big piece of my motivation. And then, like, having to extrapolate that into the book was, well, how can I help people? Number one, what kind of value will they get out of reading my chapter, right? So that's why we did the 5 things, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then, like, having people inspired more to know that there's actually systems out there that will help you build your business, or build any facet of your life, really, right? It doesn't have to be business, right? I work with companies, and quite often ownership that I work with, I also work with their mindset, and their mindset partly on their business, but partly in the personal side of their life,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Because
really interesting.
they both
Yeah.
play back against each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting that you say that, because I started out with this podcast to inspire, motivate, and pull back the curtain on business and really help and entrepreneurship, and kind of extended now to people who are creatives as well. We've had dancers, a lot of speakers on the show, musicians, things like that. But what I didn't really think that it's turned into, we delve into mindset a lot on this show, and it, of course, comes hand in hand with business. To have the right mindset through the challenging times when things are going to get tough is just as important as doing the pragmatic things of actually physically taking care and making the right steps to, often in some cases for some people, and a lot in recent times, to make sure businesses actually survive, and when things get tough, to adopt the right mindset to get through those challenging times. Because it is like your chapter, the subtitle of your chapter says, it's a roller coaster ride. But if you're willing to hang on, have the passion, know the why, and believe in what you do, you'll see the ride through, and you'll reap the fruits of what you've sown.
Absolutely. And like, the last 2.5 years or so with COVID and everything else that's hit this planet, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of good ones that have kind of thrown in the towel. And it's really unfortunate. And then they kind of get into this self-deprecation. And I just want to say to anyone else who's out there that's maybe in that spot, or maybe kind of trying to decide, or beating themselves up over this stuff, like, have some compassion for yourself, right? Like, you are working your ass off and you're doing everything you can to make it work. You're trying to keep it on the rails, right? And, like, there are people around you that support you. Don't be so hard on yourself, right? Like, everyone's going through it and you can get through this, right? And that, for me, is really important for people to understand, is that the more they kind of beat themselves up, the harder it becomes, right? And this world has too many people in it that have mental health issues. And some of that is because, and I've had them too, right? Some of that is because you get down on yourself, you get hard on yourself, right? And I just want to say, like, there are a lot of people around you that care about you and care about what you're doing. And you'd be amazed that whatever service or product you're providing, it's helping somebody have a better life. So find ways not only to feel better about yourself, but also find ways to get out of it, right? Get out of that funk that you're in, because the world needs you, and they need your talent, they need your passions.
I couldn't agree more, Keith. And again, it's playing out to be a really good organic podcast. I know we had some questions on the side, but it often goes like this. We just roll into the conversation and it just flows out as any normal conversation should. And mental health is always something we often talk about on this show. It's a big part of that. I am open and honest about the fact that I have my own struggles with it. I think it can come quite often to people who operate as owners of businesses because of the pressure. You are under, no mistake about it, a fair amount of pressure, and that can sometimes become quite overwhelming. So, but having the right people around you, doing the right things to take care of yourself, and something that you highlight there is really important, is don't be too hard on yourself. Don't judge yourself. The world does need you. You're providing a service that often saves people time, effort, energy, and money, and everybody needs that. Everybody needs that. So don't ever undervalue yourself. And I think even more importantly, don't let anyone else undervalue you. Don't let someone else's opinion of you become your reality.
Yeah, those people are the ones you want to kind of eliminate from your life. I mean,
yeah.
Like, if don't ever look at them as being the voice of God by any stretch of the imagination. So if they're telling you, oh, you can't do it, you can't do it, oh, that should just make you dig your heels in more, right? Because you can do it, right?
Yeah.
You can do it. And you don't need those kind of people in your life telling you can't, because you got enough to take care of. You got enough to deal with. You don't need to feed those demons within you by listening to somebody who really doesn't know what your life's really like, or how good you are, or how passionate you are in something.
Yeah, I think that's a great skill to have, using that sometimes negative energy that you get, or feedback from people that don't understand, and be like, right, I'm going to show you, I'm going to show myself, and I'm going to turn that energy around, make lemonade out of those lemons, and drive it to make you an even bigger success. Keith, I'm intrigued to know, you're a business surgeon. You help people with their businesses. Do you work just locally, or do you work throughout Canada, or even internationally?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I really appreciate it. We have, I've done work, or the company's done work in 8 different countries around this world, including Australia. We have a big client in Australia that we really have enjoyed doing work with over the last 2 or 3 years. And we work globally. So, a lot of this stuff can be done. And that's been one of the really great things about COVID in some ways. Like, people have become more accepting of digital presence, right? And really what we do, I don't always need to walk into somewhere to see how things operate. So, I've had companies fly me to their country and their facilities and things like that to have a look at what they're doing. And, we've made huge impact on their businesses and their companies and their success. And, a lot of the stuff that we do starts with assessment, and every single business has a certain amount of assessment that is common, right? So just like accounting, where there's general ledgers and cash flow, cash flow and projections and all those kinds of things. In operations, which is, again, that's where the name came from as well, because I'm an operations expert. There's a lot of things like KPIs and SOPs and standard operating procedures and key performance indicators and things like that the businesses need to become more efficient and more profitable. And so, with what I looked at is really like how, if we're going to, and we're in a process of actually putting something together that's going to be more digital marketing, but typically we will operate locally in Canada. But there is no reason why we can't walk into somewhere like Australia, or we've done work in Ukraine, we've done work in Central America. So there's no reason why we can't go anywhere else and do it too, right?
Yep.
And quite frankly, it's more about the people than it is about the business, because quite often it's culture, right? So if the culture is, hey, I think I need you, one of the things that is one of our USPs, our unique service propositions, is that I'm very flexible in listening and understanding exactly what the client needs or what the entrepreneur needs, right? And so, in that conversation, I get to identify, okay, where is your real struggle here, right? Like we talked about struggle and hunger for the hustle, right? Where's that struggle that we can get you to success, right? What keeps you awake at night, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're in Australia, North America, wherever, Asia. Every single business owner has something that keeps them awake at night, regardless of how successful he is, right? And so that's what we do, is we come in and we do surgery, and that's in that area, right? And we always leave it better, in a better place. So in terms of globally, like we can, we'll make it worth a client's while to have us come in, like fly in. But, I want to make sure that we actually know exactly why we're coming in. I want to know what the purpose is. I'm going to be the person driving those questions. If one of your listeners out there is going like, oh yeah, we need this guy, right? Okay, well, I'm going to get on a call with you first and go, why do you need me, right? And secondly, what do you need me for? And it's not from a perspective of, I want to provide value, right? Yeah. If it's a 5-minute conversation, I'm not going to spend your money to fly you out, to have you fly me out there and then waste that money. That goes completely against what I said earlier about bad consultants, right? I don't want this industry to be something like, I believe every entrepreneur, every company should have a business advisor, right? Someone that can be that third party that has no emotional investment in the company, that can actually look at things objectively and say, no, this is where you need to go and this is what you need to do.
It's like a business therapist almost. There you go, mate.
That's a third of my job. Is therapy.
Yeah, I can imagine. And within that, do you ever have a problem with transparency? And what I mean by that, particularly, I could see that might play out in the digital, with asking people what the problems for the business is, and then not being quite open and upfront about what the actual problems are, and just giving you the kind of either their perceived version, which isn't particularly wrong. It's just they don't have a good understanding of it, or a Reader's Digest version that doesn't really go into the authentic problem.
Yeah, transparency is really important. Like, if you want me to come in and fix your business, then you have to be honest with me, right? You can't tell me that you're doing $1 million in revenue, but not tell me that you're losing $1 million a month, right? Like, it's great. You're painting this wonderful flowery picture, rainbows and unicorns of here's my business, look at me. Meanwhile, I come in and look at, I bring one of our senior financial associate in. He looks at it and goes, "Oh, this is a mess." Like, so transparency is really, really important. Like, work with me on this. Like, we are very confidential in what we do, and we are very respectful of people and the work that they do. Like, I've been there. So I don't want people to feel like, oh, I can't tell you this because you'll judge me. And quite often, I have conversations, and that's what I hear from a lot of my clients is, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but, and then ... right?
Mm.
And it's like, because you need to tell me that, and you need to tell somebody that, right? And there is a certain level of therapy that goes with it. I'm struggling with this part of my business, or I'm struggling with managing my client and my employees because I'm not a good people person, right? Okay, well, let's change that culture. Let's shift that, right?
Right.
And so transparency is integral if you want to actually get proper solutions. Like, another reason why I got called surgeon is because you go deep to the root of the problem. You don't just put a band-aid on it, right? And once the band-aid's gone, the cancer or whatever it is, or the infection is still festering underneath, right? Well, I don't want to do that. I want to see that, right? So the only way that I can fix that, is if you tell me. Can I give you an example? Would that be okay?
Sure, I'd love to.
Okay, so let's just say that there's a company who's having a hard time hiring, right? We can't keep people. Okay, so you're bringing me in specifically to help you bring in the right person for the job. Okay, because I do operations, HR falls under operations. So I do a lot of vetting and things like that, and we work with business owners to do that, right? So it's like, okay, so if in fact the challenge is that you're having a hard time hiring good people and retaining them, I think what we really need to do before we start looking for another person is examine the culture of this company. So is the culture okay, right? Oh yeah, we this, and this. Okay, well, let me have a discussion with your employees to just see what the culture is really like, and see where it is that they think the problem is, where it lies, right? Have those discussions, because there's no point in spending all that money on hiring somebody new, and companies spend like 5 figures and more to hire the right person, and it's not the right person. And then they, 6 months to a year down the road, they're gone. And it's because the culture is crappy, not because the person's crappy, right? Person stayed the same. Common denominator and all that is the company. So what's the problem with the company? That make sense?
To me, makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, I hope it makes sense to the guys out there as well. It's about the culture. It's not about the people. The people can be the best people in the world, but if they are having to work in an environment and within a culture that restricts them or doesn't enable them to be, should we say, the best we can be, then it's not going to work. And it's not going to work time and time again. If you don't fix the problem, like you say, just put a band-aid on it, then the problem's still going to be there. Until you do it's much like I can think it really is akin to working on yourself and personal development. Until you change, the things won't change.
Absolutely.
And until the business changes, the things around it won't change.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's not just about like culture, But, you know, it can be training too. Like, how are you training these people? Are you setting them up for success? Right? And they're not successful, and all of a sudden you want to fire them, and then they get disgruntled, and then they leave. Right?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So what were the, you know, like everyone, as an employee, everyone wants to be treated like they want to be treated with respect. They want to be feel valued, all those things, right? If some of those things go, for whatever reason, they're not being compensated enough or whatever it might be, right? They're going to walk, right? And if you don't cultivate a culture of loyalty that creates loyalty, people will walk. I've seen companies where, you know, like you are a sub-trade, right? Your company or what you've been part of is a sub-trade in the past, right? I've worked with sub-trades, and you know, they have like guys who come in, it's all great, they're wonderful, and then they leave. And then you go, why you leave? Well, I got, you know, 25 cents an hour down the block more, right? It's like, well, why would you do that? Well, because they don't necessarily like the company they got moved into, right? Right. If there's loyalty, if you build loyalty within your employees, people will stay. They want you to be successful, because then ultimately it means their security too.
Mm.
Right?
I think vision ties into that as well. The company having a vision and a good idea, a good steer of where it's going, and not just as the owner knowing that, but everyone who works for the company knowing that as well. You know, then they are going to want it to be successful. They're going to know what we're aiming towards, what the goal is, and everyone having that clear vision is going to, you know, a whole series of things are going to come from that, including, you know, goals, you know, on the way to attaining the smaller goals, to attaining the bigger goal, and getting the vision happening and being tangible.
Yeah. If you think like, so I'm going to speak to business owners for just a second, because this is for more than just business owners. But if you think that your employees know exactly what your vision is or who your company is, first of all, go write it down yourself. If you don't know, how do you expect them to know? Number one. Number two, if you go to them and they are completely off the mark of what you are, what your company is, not what it does, but what it is, right? Then there's something that you need to address. And probably there's a lot of communication around your vision and around what you want your culture to be within the company, right? Who are we? You know, it's a question that when you start to mature as a business, and even as a person, you go, who am I? Who am I really? Right? When you start to see that, and other people see that in you, and you're in alignment with that, now you're on the right path. So, you know, it's not enough companies think their employees know who they are, what the company is, who it is. But go ask your employees, because I'll bet at least 70% of them don't really know what your vision is or what the company is. Right?
There you go. There's an actionable challenge there for anyone watching or listening to this, now live or later. An actionable challenge, an example of something you can do right away that might just add a lot of value to your business. I've dropped Keith's link, the businesssurgeon.ca, into the comments there. Everyone will be able to see that whether they're watching it now or later, but I will spell it out for anyone watching on audio. It's businesssurgeon.ca. It's as simple as that. No funny letters or anything else, just businesssurgeon.ca, and you'll be able to connect with Keith there and speak with his people and see if they can help you and help your business.
Absolutely. And it's 3 S's in the middle. That's what everyone says. Oh, there's 3 S's in the middle. Yes, there is. But yeah, it's you know, I'm always happy to talk to business owners. I mean, drop me a line. You can go through our website to contact me. I'm happy to talk and just get to know your business, because that's actually what I love doing, is getting to know people and their businesses. And then it becomes a conversation of, well, have you tried this? Right. And then it becomes, oh, well, you know, and then it becomes, hey, we'd like to hire you. It's not like and there's no obligation. The conversation is no obligation. I'm just happy to talk to people and find out what their jam is and why they're passionate about what they do. You know, that's,
Yeah.
like I said before, they're what they do is important to this world. So, you know, go make something of it, right? Be successful. Success is fun. It's not hard work. It's supposed to be fun.
It's supposed to be fun. Life's supposed to be fun, right? It's supposed to be fun, and I think we often forget that. It's a really good point to wrap up and end on. Actually, I think life is supposed to be fun. We sometimes lose a steer of that because we're working so hard, but it's meant to be fun in everything that you do. And I think making the time to have the fun is really important. Really balances you out.
Absolutely. Watch people shift when they've had a near-death experience. They have a lot less of a drive towards getting something done and a lot more in experiencing life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, even some of our authors in the book have gone
Yes.
through that, right?
Yes, they have. Many of them have, actually, to be honest.
Yeah. It's a good book. You know, to the reader or the people who are listening, if you haven't picked up the book, go get it. Like, it's, you can see the price is so reasonable. And to have 28, you know, very experienced people, experience in life and business, not just business, but in life, and tell those stories, you know, like, these will inspire you. And maybe if we just get to influence one person to do good for this world, you know, beyond what they're doing now, you know, it's made the book so worth it. Really has.
I genuinely couldn't have put it better myself, Keith. So it is a fantastic book, and it will add value to your life wherever you're from in the world, whatever walk of life you're from and are doing, and that doesn't have to be business. Also, something worth mentioning, the proceeds from the book do go to a really good charity in the UK called Beanie's Arc that supports and funds research into treatment of a very rare form of childhood cancer. So you're not just helping yourself, you're not just helping the people around you, but you're also helping those little kids as well. So it's all good. It's all good. And $2.99, it won't be that price for very much longer. By Sunday, I can tell you that price will have gone up. So if you're watching this after that, I'm sorry you're going to have to pay a little bit more. But if you're watching it now, then go and get it, guys. Go and get Hunger for the Hustle. Volume 1, Stories of Struggles to Success. I promise you will enjoy it and find some value from it. Keith, thank you for your time today.
You're very welcome. Doesn't matter what price you buy it for, the value is in there.
Yes.
It absolutely is. So
yeah,
you're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me on, Jake. I really appreciate it. Been honored, very much honored to be part of this book. And so honored that, you know, I know you guys are looking at doing further books along this vein, and I'm out there looking for clients. I'm talking to people who could be potentially part of the next book as well.
Sounds great. Yeah. The goal is to keep bringing one out every year, which is a lot of work. But we'll figure it out. We'll jump out the plane and build the parachute as we go down. It's how I like to do things.
Awesome. Yeah, as Steve Harvey says, just jump.
Yeah,
just jump.
You'll figure it out. If not, you'll land eventually.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Keith. And thank you to all you guys, whether you're watching or listening now, live or later. This has been the Hunger for the Hustle podcast. You have been a part of that, and I appreciate you. A show is nothing without its audience. So stay healthy, stay happy, stay hungry, and keep on hustling, folks. Until next time, thank you.